Hello, my name is Carey Snyder. I'm from Ohio University, and my paper is entitled The Global Dialogics of the New Age. The London-based weekly, The New Age, edited by A.R. Oraj from 1907 to 1922, was known for promoting spirited debate on politics, literature, and the arts. Influentially, an artist has argued that the New Age was unique in its commitment to what we might now term the Bakhtinian dialogics in the public sphere. Scholars have been attentive to the way Oraj, in concert with his romantic and editorial partner, Beatrice Hastings, achieved this editorial aim by pitting contributors with opposing viewpoints against one another, but have paid less attention to the controversy-generating potential of correspondence. This crucial function of letters, both within the New Age and more broadly within modernist periodicals, warrants closer attention. Arguably the most overtly dialogical part of magazines, letters columns put multiple perspectives and voices directly in conversation with one another. In the New Age, the letters column was also a site of transnational dialogue. It served as a kind of hub or switchboard, linking not only individual readers with other readers and contributors from around the world, but also facilitating dialogue between wider discursive and periodical communities. In this way, I argue, the letters column facilitated the magazine's unusual openness to discord and dissent, thus providing an important space for debate across ideological, racial, and national boundaries. A distribution map published in the March 3, 1910 supplement of the New Age highlights the magazine's global reach. With this image, the New Age boasts a readership that stretches from Melbourne to Johannesburg to Jamaica, a range mirrored by the geographical diversity of its content and contributors list. Affirming the magazine's international focus, Anna Snaith observes, nearly every page engages with imperial politics or colonial affairs. It provided a forum for anti-colonial writers, including the Sudanese-Egyptian Dusé Mohammed, later Dusé Muhammad Ali, the Irish activist Francis Sheehy Skeffington, and the English nationalist B.K. Doss. As Oraj suggested in a 1909 editorial, as a socialist review, the magazine took an interest in the economically disadvantaged of other nations. Though Tom Villas has observed that the New Age also provided a consistent forum for radical right writers. More than supporting a particular political or ideological perspective, the magazine was committed to incorporating a diversity of viewpoints. In Hastings' words, the contras as well as the pros of any argument. Hence, it published feminist alongside anti-feminist polemics, racist vitriol alongside anti-imperialist and pan-African perspectives. The letters are an important, neglected site for tracking the magazine's contentious, sometimes transnational, debates. As a case study of the magazine's global dialogics, I will focus here on an 11-month debate that unfolded in New Age correspondence concerning the so-called Black Peril, a supposed epidemic of Black men attempting to rape white women in South Africa. Some critical commentators of the day regarded the peril as exaggerated or false, what historians today, such as Jock McCulloch, consider a moral panic, fueled by a desire to reinforce white supremacy. The flames of the peril were stoked by the Umtali case of December 1910, in which Lord Gladstone commuted the death sentence of an Umtali native named Alukaleda, convicted of attempted rape, to life imprisonment, due to the dubious evidence of the case. Gladstone's decision sparked mass protests and petitions across the white community in South Africa and heated discussions about race and racism that reverberated throughout the empire. Writing under the cheeky pseudonym Es Verdad, Spanish for It's the Truth, New Age staff writer J.M. Kennedy took up the case in his Foreign Affairs column, sparking responses from readers across the globe. Along with ordinary readers from South Africa, Australia, and England, these responses included an article from acclaimed author Dusé Mohammed, along with letters from other prominent figures, including leading African-American intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois and British suffragette Emily Wilding Davison. As well-known figures within major social movements for race and gender equality, respectively, These correspondents arguably spoke not just as individuals, but as representatives of collectives. Moreover, their close ties to culturally significant magazines, Du Bois as editor of Crisis, Davison as a regular contributor to Votes for Women, and Muhammad as soon-to-be editor of the African Times and Orient Review, makes for an extraordinarily direct instance of the linkages of a periodical network. Germane here is Lucy Delap's concept of the periodical community, comprised of sets of journals that identify each other as important players and promote debate and controversy between each other. The New Age Letters column functions, then, as a space where the distinct communities represented by these different periodicals can engage in direct dialogue with an unusual degree of candor. The Black Peril debate raised issues that were especially relevant to these other periodicals of racial discrimination, gender inequality, sexual violence, and political disenfranchisement. However, unlike Crisis or Votes for Women, the New Age was not an organ or a special interest paper, and so provided a forum where contributors with staunchly opposing viewpoints could talk to one another. While I've written before about how the Black Peril debate exemplifies the affordances of the serial form of correspondence, here I want to examine how the gendered and racial politics of this debate was shaped by its position within this periodical network, and by the ideological and national contexts of its interlocutors. Writing as S. Verdad, the conservative columnist J.M. Kennedy detonated the New Age Black Peril debate on February 16, 1911, by writing of Gladstone's decision regarding the Umtali case. If the unanimous voice of democracy is right, it follows that his lordship must be wrong in reprieving a native for an attempted outrage on a white woman. Since the black native is racially inferior, his punishment should be much more severe. While he justifies this bigoted view as the will of the democracy, it chimes with Verdad's racist ruminations from the previous month, when, writing of the so-called American Negro question, he declares, "To give such beings complete liberty was the greatest mistake ever made in the history of the American continent." In a polemical style characteristic of the New Age, Kennedy's Verdad thus provoked a multifaceted debate about race, gender, and sexuality that reverberated for nearly a year, though he himself remained from then on the sidelines. While the New Age gave Kennedy a platform for airing such baldly racist views, it likewise gave considerable space to the staunch anti-imperialist and emerging Pan-Africanist Duse Muhammad, who effectively rebuts Verdad the following week. A regular contributor to the New Age, Muhammad had just published In the Land of the Pharaohs, a fervid nationalist history of Egypt. Later that year, he would attend the first Universal Races Congress in London, which in turn would inspire him to launch, in 1912, the African Times and Orient Review. Both the Congress and Muhammad's journal are seen as landmarks in the Pan-African movement. Despite his blatant prejudice against Black Africans, Kennedy himself had reviewed the Egyptian-born author's book in surprisingly respectful and favorable terms in the same issue in which he denounced Gladstone's ruling. The New Age then published a second favorable review, In the Land of the Pharaohs, in a literary supplement. Hence, in part thanks to the New Age's endorsement of his work, it was as a lauded author and notable anti-imperialist that Muhammad entered the Peril debate. In a lengthy February 1911 article that denounced the mistreatment of natives across the empire, Muhammad directly countered the views espoused by Verdad, Kennedy, without mentioning his New Age colleague by name. He disputed the veracity of both the accusations of rape and the racist assumptions that fueled the Peril, declaring that Negroes are not the savages they are represented to be. Muhammad cited Harvard PhD W.E.B. Du Bois, who would soon join the thread, along with the late esteemed poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, among a list of illustrious individuals who, quote, give the lie to the oft-repeated slander that the Negro is incapable of high intelligence. Regarding the persecution of Black men in South Africa as analogous to the lynching of African Americans in the U.S. South, Muhammad shifts the blame from black men to white women, whom he sees as false accusers and instigators of racial violence. Given the shaky evidence of the case, Muhammad concludes that Gladstone's policy was the correct policy and the only safe one, and this notwithstanding the hysterical shrieks of bloodthirsty Boer women. In the crossfire that ensued in the correspondence section, South African readers took issue with both columnists' characterization of the case. S. Coetzee, for instance, objected both to Verdad's preposterous remarks on the subject of natives and to Muhammad's slandering of Boer women. J. F. Riordan of Johannesburg concurred with Verdad's assessment of growing racial antagonism in South Africa, but criticized his jingoistic perspective. Later, other South African readers joined the thread, along with a colonial administrator from the West Indies and a reader from Australia. In print culture histories beyond the metropolis, James Connolly and Patrick Collier attest to the metropolitan bias in histories of print culture, which too often imagine, quote, provincial cities, rural communities, or colonial outposts as passive recipients of a culture moving out from the metropolitan center. The far-flung readers who joined the Black Peril thread are anything but passive, as they actively shape or redirect the conversation, often purporting to correct the record from their own perspective and geographic location. While these correspondents reference coverage of the peril in South African newspapers, their choice to write into a metropolitan periodical suggests that they are making sense of the local in relation to broader imperial and transnational frameworks. Readers like these were encouraged to see their letters as central to the paper's editorial aim of open-ended debate. The high status the New Age accorded to correspondence is suggested by the amount of real estate devoted to it. Letters often comprise 20% or more of the total page count, and starting in 1909, letter writers were listed individually in the table of contents. This practice elevated the ordinary reader to the status of contributor, while spotlighting the not infrequent contributions of high-profile readers. One such reader was the prominent intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois, who joined the thread in the June 15th issue to censor Verdad's unwarranted and insulting attack on Black Americans. The American Negro, a book Du Bois co-authored with Booker T. Washington, had been favorably reviewed in the New Age 2 years earlier. Not only a distinguished scholar, he also entered the debate as a founding member of the NAACP, or National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and founding editor in 1910 of its organ Crisis magazine. Targeting a primary audience of educated African Americans, Crisis at once aimed to document the achievements of the race and to chronicle racial discrimination, both nationally and to a lesser extent globally. The magazine's support of the transnational Pan-African movement can be seen in its extensive coverage of the Universal Races Congress, which included Du Bois among its speakers. The Congress aimed to shine a spotlight on racism worldwide, promote interracial understanding, and establish a scientific basis for dealing with racial questions. In 1911, then, in the space of a month, Du Bois crossed the Atlantic twice, once figuratively, once literally, to address racial discrimination and injustice in transnational forums. Du Bois described the Races Congress as an invaluable opportunity for speakers of different nationalities to meet, quote, as men and equals in the center of the world. A striking phrase that speaks to the cultural capital of this metropolitan venue. Although its aims were very different, the New Age was another metropolitan venue that promised to provide, in the editor's words, quote, some neutral ground where intelligences may meet on equal terms. In his letter to the New Age, Du Bois accuses the magazine of falling short of its mission by allowing Verdad to, quote, parade his ignorance in inexcusable offensive language in a manner beneath the dignity of a decent periodical. Du Bois thus highlights the periodical's accountability to its readership and raises the issue of what parameters should govern public sphere debates such as this. On the one hand, even as Du Bois objected that the New Age has abandoned its apparently liberal ethos and a basic standard of civility, the very publication of his letter suggests that the column was serving as a forum for transnational public sphere debate. Not every periodical welcomed dissenting views from its readers. In Du Bois' letter, he identified himself only as, quote, a Black American and a believer in the doctrines of socialism. But he also wielded the pen as editor of Crisis and fulfilled one of that magazine's editorial missions by acting as media watchdog. This was a consistent aim for Du Bois even before he founded Crisis. In 1907, for instance, he sought to publish a response to a racist article in McClure's, but the editors refused, stating that they did not want to, quote, open our pages to controversy. The New Age, in contrast, reveled in controversy. The letters column enabled Du Bois to reach beyond the large, but in some ways like-minded audience of Crisis readers to address an audience that included some hostile to the very premise of racial equality. On the other hand, surely intelligences cannot meet on equal terms when one party denies the basic humanity of the other. In the column in question, Verdad's vitriolic insistence on the biological inferiority of people of color functions as hate speech, shutting down possibilities for public discourse. With repugnant statements such as, quote, our English writers on democracy would do well to leave niggers out of the question when discussing the equality, even the theoretical equality before the law of the human race, Verdad reinforces white supremacist ideology that works to ban people of color from participating in a democratic exchange of ideas. Verdad's column becomes a kind of test case for free speech, and Du Bois is right to question whether the New Age is justified in providing a platform for such vitriol. Is it necessary, he demands? Are there no gentlemen among the Fabian socialists who can write? Is it necessary to be a blackguard in order to be brilliant? And does the New Age prefer this sort of thing to the truth? Does it propose to allow Mr. Verdad to continue his assault, as he promises to do? With this volley of questions, Du Bois confronts the New Age for transgressing the boundaries of civility, and implies that the magazine has an ethical responsibility to censor ignorant or incendiary speech. The global scope of this debate sometimes necessitated a lag in response, but 3 months later, a reader from Australia named Grant Harvey joined the fray to defend Verdad's combative style. In contrast to a view of periodicals as ephemeral, disposable objects, Harvey speaks of carefully archiving past issues, quote, the New Age being one of those paper, and they are few, that one religiously preserves. Harvey's archives include British periodicals across the political spectrum, from the socialist Clarion to the conservative National Review, but he singles out the New Age as unique in its commitment to promoting frank debate about contentious issues. Harvey considers Verdad's pugilistic style a valuable corrective to overly cautious and polite public discourse, which skirts around important issues. He argues that Verdad's writings are, quote, valuable precisely insofar as they are plain, blunt, and even, if you like, offensive. It is only the writer and speaker who is offensive, i.e. who infuriates the other side, who is of any use. Harvey's lauding of offensive utterances starkly contrasts with Du Bois's prizing of civility in public discourse. Is it necessary, Du Bois asks, to be deliberately insulting? Harvey answers emphatically yes. It is precisely this capacity to offend that Harvey values in the New Age. Marshalling the offensive rhetoric that he celebrates, Harvey caricatures the mainstream press as platitudinous and sentimental. Platitude mongers and solemn slobberers of sickening sentimentality have in England a practical monopoly of the platform and the press, he writes. The New Age itself is supremely useful simply as a medium of escape from this avalanche of Christian slobber. Its writers are always offending somebody, as is their vocational duty. hence the particular excellence of its correspondence columns. Harvey considers the New Age's capacity to offend, to, quote, infuriate the other side, as a great service to its, quote, worldwide army of intelligent readers. Core contributor Beatrice Hastings definitely took it as her vocational duty to offend, infuriate, and provoke debate. As I've documented elsewhere, building on scholarship by artists, DLAP, and others, Hastings played a central role in choreographing controversy around feminist issues in the New Age, and specifically in fanning the flames of the Black Peril debate. Very briefly here, then, I will only say that in the 22 June issue, after first noting her approval of Du Bois's letter and making the patronizing pronouncement that she is, quote, quite one-sided in appreciating Black people, Hastings reignites a debate that had gone dormant for a few months by declaring, the present epidemic in Africa of native crime is the result of the cry of the white woman for the blood of the Umtali native. Fulfilling her vocational duty to offend, Hastings broadens Muhammad's earlier remark about Boer women to include all white women, and construes their bloodthirsty cry as the cause of violence, not merely an inappropriate response to it. A reader from Johannesburg, T.A.R. Perchar, strongly condemns Hastings' quote, imputations against our womenfolk, fashioning her as an uninformed outsider, dangerously posing as one with intimate knowledge of the distant colony, a characterization Hastings will go on to dispute. Claiming to have long been an admirer of the frank outspokenness of the New Age, and of the journal's commitment to reporting plain facts, Perchar aims to correct the record on the Black Peril and to make the journal accountable to overseas readers. Hastings' incendiary remarks compel other readers to address the woman question. William Marwick, a former civil servant in West Africa and Jamaica, who professes, quote, deep sympathy with the colored races in all lands, takes issue with the implication that the Black Peril is exaggerated or false. As evidence, he quotes extensively from a speech from the Universal Races Congress by Mrs. McFadyen, wife of a British civil servant and president of the Women's Enfranchisement League in Cape Town. McFadyen maintains that while safe before, white women were now in grave danger from natives corrupted by, quote, the distribution of indecent pictures, the supply of intoxicants, and worse than all, the evil example of certain depraved white men in the treatment of native women. McFadyen is, in other words, as concerned with the white peril as with Black peril, and sees sexual violence and male violence more generally as a problem that cuts across race. She sees the franchise, notably of white women, as the solution. McFadyen's speech was widely covered in the suffrage press. Thus, as with Du Bois's voice, McFadyen's virtual inclusion in this debate represents a merging of periodical communities. Prominent suffragette and regular Votes for Women contributor Emily Wilding Davison echoes McFadyen's assessment 2 weeks later, forming another bridge between the suffrage press and the New Age. Davison writes that the Black Peril question is not a mere race question, but a sex question, and as such, a world question. She highlights the injustice of allowing white men who sexually violate Black women to go scot-free, whilst exacting a fierce penalty from the Black. The fundamental devaluation of women, who are, quote, the white man's goods and chattels, is at the root of sexual violence, and the franchise, again for white women, is the answer. Both McFadyen and Davison call attention to racial injustice, but reinscribe racial hierarchies by advocating for the enfranchisement of their own race. By hitching the case for the women's franchise to a discussion of Black Peril in the New Age, these writers bring the concerns of the suffrage press to an ideologically diverse audience. The Black Peril thread serves as a case study of the global dialogics of the New Age. New Age readers from across the globe showed an eagerness to participate in transnational debates curated by a London magazine. The Letters column invited readers from different political, geographic, and ideological backgrounds to engage in spirited, often contentious debate. The magazine's hallmark pugilistic style alienated some contributors, but was prized by others for providing controversial debates a place to unfold. Unlike propaganda papers or organs of social movements, like Votes for Women or Crisis, the New Age encouraged different publics to engage with one another. Theoretically, it served as a free discursive zone where equal intelligences could meet and debate. However, correspondents like Du Bois and Davison serve as reminders that such debates remained embedded in larger frameworks of racial and gender inequality. Thank you.